During the estate division, my father proclaimed, "Merit over birthright, you get Zilch." I produced the overlooked deed, claiming the prime asset and flipping the tables. I, 32M, never thought the day would come when I'd have to sit across from my father and listen to him tell me I wasn't good enough. But there I was, in the mahogany-lined study of our family estate, watching him announce his decision with the same cold precision he'd used to build his real estate empire. The meeting had been called 2 weeks prior. Dad's health had been declining, and he wanted to settle the estate before things got worse. My younger brother flew in from Singapore, my sister drove up from the city, and I took time off from my construction management job to be there. We all knew this conversation was coming, but none of us expected what actually happened. Dad sat behind his desk, the same one he'd used for 40 years, and laid out several folders. His lawyer sat beside him, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who kept his expression carefully neutral. Mom wasn't there. She'd passed 3 years ago, and I think part of Dad died with her. What remained was this hard, calculating version of the man who used to take me fishing on weekends. He started with the properties. The beach house in Malibu went to my brother, who'd become a successful hedge fund manager. The downtown commercial building went to my sister, who'd married into old money and ran a nonprofit. Then he got to the crown jewel, the original family property, a sprawling estate with the main house, goose houses, and 20 acres of prime land worth at least $15 million. Dad looked straight at me when he said it. Merit over birthright. Those were his exact words. He said my brother had demonstrated business acumen. My sister had maintained the family's social standing, but I had chosen a blue-collar path that didn't reflect the family's values. The main estate would be sold, and the proceeds divided between my siblings. I would receive a small cash settlement of $50,000. I felt my face flush. My sister looked down at her hands. My brother, to his credit, seemed uncomfortable but said nothing. The lawyer shuffled papers. I asked Dad if this was really how he saw things, if the years I'd spent working construction to learn the business from the ground up meant nothing. He told me that if I'd wanted to prove myself, I should have done it through success, not manual labor. He said he'd given me every opportunity, paid for my education, and I'd squandered it by choosing to work with my hands instead of my mind. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been prepared for this moment for 3 years. Mom had called me the week before she died. She was in the hospital, and Dad had stepped out to take a business call. She told me she needed to talk to me about something important, something she'd kept secret for a long time. Her voice was weak, but her words were clear. She explained that when she and Dad first got married, her parents had gifted them a significant parcel of land as a wedding present. It was the eastern section of what would become our family estate, about 8 acres that included the original farmhouse and the best view of the valley. Dad had built his empire from there, but the land had always legally belonged to Mom. She'd never bothered to correct anyone's assumption that it was all Dad's property. Mom told me she'd watched over the years as Dad grew harder, more focused on status and achievement. She'd seen how he dismissed my choice to learn construction, how he favored my siblings' more prestigious paths. She said she wanted to make sure I was taken care of, that I had something that couldn't be taken away by Dad's changing opinions. She'd had her lawyer draw up a deed transfer before she went into the hospital. The eastern parcel, including the original farmhouse and surrounding land, would be transferred to me upon her death. The paperwork was filed with the county, but she'd asked her lawyer to keep it quiet. She wanted me to have it as insurance, as proof that someone believed in me. I'd kept that deed in a safety deposit box for 3 years, never mentioning it to anyone. Part of me hoped I'd never need to use it. Part of me wanted to believe Dad would come around, that he'd see the value in what I was doing. But sitting there in his study, listening to him tell me I wasn't worthy of the family legacy, I realized that day wasn't coming. I let Dad finish his presentation. I let the lawyer go through all the paperwork. I watched my siblings sign their acknowledgement forms. Then, when everyone thought we were done, I pulled out a folder of my own. I told them there was something we needed to discuss before finalizing anything. Dad looked annoyed, like I was wasting his time. I slid copies of the deed across the desk, one for Dad, one for the lawyer, one for each of my siblings. The room went silent as they read. The lawyer's eyebrows shot up. My sister's mouth opened slightly. My brother leaned forward, studying the document. Dad's face went through several colors before settling on a deep red. The deed was clear and legally sound. Mom had transferred the eastern 8 acres to me 3 years ago. The transfer had been properly recorded. The land was mine, free and clear, and had been since before her death. More importantly, that 8 acres included the original house, the one Dad had renovated and expanded into the main residence. It included the circular driveway, the 4-car garage, the pool, and the view that made the property so valuable. Dad asked what kind of game I was playing. I told him it wasn't a game. It was Mom's decision, made when she was of sound mind, with proper legal counsel. I'd had 3 years to contest it or mention it, but I'd kept quiet, hoping we could remain a family. His decision today showed me that hope was misplaced. The lawyer examined the deed carefully, then confirmed its validity. He pointed out that the county records showed the transfer had been properly executed and recorded. There was no question about its legitimacy. My brother asked why Mom had done this. I explained what she'd told me in the hospital, about wanting to make sure I was protected, about the land originally being her family's gift. My sister started to cry, saying she'd had no idea Mom felt that way. Dad stood up, his hands shaking. He said Mom had no right to do this behind his back, that she'd betrayed him. I reminded him that it was her property to do with as she wished, that she'd brought it into the marriage and had every legal right to dispose of it as she saw fit. The implications started to sink in. The main house, the centerpiece of Dad's planned estate sale, sat on my land. He couldn't sell it without my permission. The access road came through my property. The utilities ran through my land. Without my cooperation, the remaining property would be landlocked and worth a fraction of its current value. Dad told me I was being vindictive, that I was trying to destroy the family. I reminded him that he was the one who'd just told me I wasn't worthy of being part of it. I said I'd come to this meeting hoping for fairness, maybe even recognition, but instead I'd been dismissed and humiliated. Now we'd see what merit really meant. The lawyer suggested we all take a break and reconvene after everyone had time to process. Dad refused, demanding we settle it now. I told him there was nothing to settle on my end. The deed was valid, the land was mine, and I'd decide what to do with it on my own timeline. My brother tried to mediate, suggesting we work out some kind of arrangement. I asked him where that concern for fairness had been 10 minutes ago when I was being written off with pocket change. He went quiet. I stood up and told them I'd be in touch through my own lawyer. Dad could keep his $50,000. I had something worth far more, the land Mom trusted me with, and the knowledge that at least one parent had believed in me. Walking out of that study was the hardest thing I'd ever done. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But I kept my back straight and my head up. Update 1. The first week after the meeting was chaos. Dad's lawyer called mine 4 times trying to negotiate. My brother sent long emails talking about family unity. My sister left tearful voicemails saying we needed to talk. I didn't respond to any of them. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out what I actually wanted. The land was mine, but what did that mean? Did I want to live there? Sell it? Use it as leverage? I drove out to the property one evening, parking at the bottom of the hill and walking up through the old oak grove. The main house stood at the top, lights on in Dad's study. I could see his silhouette through the window. He was probably with his lawyer, strategizing. I walked to the original farmhouse instead. It was still standing, though Dad had converted it into a guest house years ago. I had a key. I'd stayed there sometimes when visiting. I let myself in and sat in the kitchen where Mom used to make breakfast when I was a kid. The memories came flooding back. Mom teaching me to crack eggs. Dad showing me how to fix the screen door. Family dinners before everything got complicated. I realized that what I wanted wasn't revenge, it was recognition. I wanted Dad to see me as something other than a disappointment. But sitting there in the quiet, I also realized that recognition couldn't be forced. Dad had made his choice. He decided that my worth was tied to status and money, not to character or effort. Nothing I did with this land would change his mind about that. So I had to decide what I wanted for myself, separate from his approval. I spent the next few days researching options. The land was zoned for residential and agricultural use. The location was prime, close enough to the city to be valuable, far enough out to feel private. I could subdivide and sell lots. I could develop it myself. I could keep it as is and build a life there. Then I got a call from Mom's best friend. She'd heard about the situation from my sister and wanted to meet for coffee. I almost said no, but something made me agree. We met at a cafe downtown. She was in her 70s, sharp and direct. She told me she'd known about the deed, Mom had confided in her before she died. She said Mom had agonized over the decision, worried it would cause family problems, but more worried about leaving me vulnerable to Dad's favoritism. She told me something else too. Mom had left her a letter to give me if this situation ever arose. She pulled it out of her purse, a sealed envelope with my name in Mom's handwriting. I couldn't open it there. I took it home, made coffee, and sat at my kitchen table. My hands were shaking when I broke the seal. Mom's letter was 3 pages long. She wrote about watching me grow up, about how proud she was of the man I'd become. She said she'd always admired my willingness to learn from the ground up, to understand how things actually worked instead of just managing from above. She wrote that Dad's values had changed over the years, that success and status had become more important to him than integrity and character. She said the land was meant to be my foundation, literally and figuratively. She hoped I'd never need to use it as leverage, but if I did, she wanted me to know she believed in me. She wrote that real merit wasn't about money or prestige. It was about building something meaningful with your own hands and heart. The last paragraph broke me. She wrote that she hoped someday Dad would understand what he was missing, but if he didn't, she wanted me to know that her love and pride weren't conditional. I was enough, exactly as I was. I sat there with tears running down my face, reading her words over and over. Update 2. 3 weeks after the meeting, Dad's lawyer made a formal offer. They proposed that I sell the eastern parcel back to the estate for fair market value, about $4 million based on comparable sales. In exchange, I'd release any claims on the structures built on the land, and the estate sale could proceed as planned. My lawyer said it was a reasonable offer. $4 million was nothing to sneeze at. I could take the money, walk away, and build a life without the family drama. But I kept thinking about Mom's letter, about building something meaningful. I called my lawyer back and told him I had a counteroffer. I wanted to keep the land, but I was willing to grant Dad a life estate in the main house. He could live there until he died or chose to leave, rent-free. After that, the house and all structures would revert to me. In exchange, Dad would acknowledge in writing that the eastern parcel was mine by right, not by conflict, and that Mom's decision to transfer it had been valid and respected. My lawyer thought I was crazy. I was giving up millions in potential sale value for what? Principle? Pride? I told him it was neither. It was about honoring Mom's intention while not completely destroying Dad's life. It was about being the better person, even when the other person didn't deserve it. Dad rejected the offer immediately. His lawyer called mine and said it was insulting, that I was trying to control him, that he'd fight the deed's validity in court if necessary. My lawyer told me that any court fight would be expensive and ugly, but we'd almost certainly win. The deed was airtight. Still, litigation could drag on for years. I told him to respond with one sentence. The offer stands for 30 days, then I proceed with my own plans for the property. That got their attention. 2 days later, my brother called. Not an email, not a message, an actual phone call. He asked if we could meet in person. I agreed, suggesting a restaurant halfway between our homes. He showed up looking tired. We ordered coffee and sat in uncomfortable silence for a minute. Then he apologized. He said he'd been thinking about everything, about how he'd sat there silently while Dad humiliated me. He said it wasn't right, that he should have spoken up. I appreciated the apology, but I asked him why he was really there. He admitted that Dad had asked him to talk to me, to try to negotiate. But he said he also wanted to understand what I actually wanted, because to him it looked like I was throwing away millions out of spite. I told him about Mom's letter, about her wanting me to build something meaningful. I explained that I didn't want revenge, I wanted purpose. I'd spent years learning construction and development, and now I had a chance to do something with that knowledge. I told him my actual plan. I wanted to develop the property, but not as a McMansion subdivision. I wanted to create a community focused on sustainable building, affordable housing for working families, maybe even a training center for young people learning skilled trades. I had 8 acres of prime land and the skills to make it happen. My brother listened, really listened. Then he asked what would happen to Dad. I explained the life estate offer. Dad could stay in the house he'd built, maintain his dignity, live out his years in the home he loved. He just had to acknowledge that I had the right to do what I wanted with my own property. My brother said Dad would never agree to that. His pride wouldn't allow it. I said that was Dad's choice to make, but my offer was genuine and wouldn't change. We finished our coffee, and my brother promised to talk to Dad again. I told him not to bother on my account. I was at peace with whatever happened. Update 3. The 30-day deadline came and went without a response from Dad. I moved forward with my plans, hiring an architect to design a small community development. I met with the County Planning Commission about permits and zoning. I started lining up financing and contractors. Word got around. Local news picked up the story, not the family drama part, but the sustainable development angle. I gave a few interviews about my vision for affordable, quality housing built with innovative techniques. My company's phone started ringing with people interested in buying units before they were even built. Dad's lawyer called and asked for an extension. I said no. The life estate offer had expired. Now Dad would need to negotiate from a weaker position if he wanted to stay in the house. I felt a little guilty about that. But I also felt something else, freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't seeking Dad's approval. I was building something on my own terms, using the foundation Mom had given me. Then, 6 weeks after the deadline, something unexpected happened. Dad showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't let him in. He looked older than I remembered, thinner. He asked if we could talk. I made coffee. It seemed like all my important conversations happened over coffee now, and we sat at my small kitchen table. Dad didn't apologize. That wasn't his way. But he told me he'd been thinking about Mom a lot lately, about their early years when they were building everything from nothing. He said he'd forgotten somewhere along the way that the point wasn't accumulating wealth, it was building a life worth living. He said he'd read the news articles about my development plans. He admitted, quietly, that they were good plans. Smart plans. The kind of thing he would have respected if he hadn't been so focused on surface-level success markers. I asked him what he wanted. He said he didn't want to fight anymore. He was tired, and fighting me felt like fighting Mom's memory. He asked if the life estate offer was really off the table. I told him the original offer was gone, but we could work something out. I said I'd grant him the life estate on 3 conditions. First, he had to acknowledge in writing that Mom's transfer of the land was valid and respected. Second, he had to attend the groundbreaking ceremony for my development and publicly support the project. Third, he had to stop measuring his children's worth by their bank accounts and social standing. Dad was quiet for a long time. Then he asked if I'd really cut him off from the house he'd built if he said no. I told him I would, because I'd learned from him that sometimes you have to make hard choices based on principle. He'd taught me that merit mattered. I was just applying the lesson. He actually smiled at that, a sad, tired smile. He said he deserved that. He agreed to my terms. We worked out the details over the next week. Dad's lawyer drew up the life estate agreement. Dad wrote a letter acknowledging Mom's wishes and his respect for her decision. He even helped me navigate some of the county permitting bureaucracy, using connections he'd built over decades. The groundbreaking ceremony happened 3 months later. Dad stood next to me while I turned the first shovel of earth. He gave a short speech about building legacies that mattered, about being proud of all his children for finding their own paths. My brother and sister were there too. It felt like the first real family moment we'd had in years. Now, a year later, the first phase of the development is complete. 12 families are moving into well-built, affordable homes. I'm living in the renovated farmhouse, the one where Mom used to make breakfast. Dad still lives in the main house, and we have dinner together once a month. It's not perfect, we disagree on plenty, but there's respect now, on both sides. My brother invested in the second phase of the development. My sister's nonprofit is partnering with me to create a job training program on site. We're becoming a family again, slowly, on new terms. The deed Mom left me wasn't just property. It was proof that someone believed in me when I needed it most. It was the foundation I built everything else on, literally and figuratively. Dad said merit mattered over birthright, and he was right. He just didn't realize I'd already earned it. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.